Welcome to the Cafe Culture podcast, a season of discussions on culture, politics, philosophy and science.
At a talk recorded on the 19th of October 2015, Jim Beirne discussed cultural leadership and enterprise in a changed public sector.
Thank you very much. So I run a theatre and I don't normally let people sit at the back. But this time I'll let you sit there comfortably. Okay, so just very quickly as an introduction, I came to live theatre in 2000, so I've been working for live theatre for 15 years. I started life as a composer, as a lute player and composer, became a manager of arts programs, then a funder, and now I'm a manager again. And in my time at Live, I would have described it as this. So I started at Live Theatre in 2000 as the chief exec of a new writing producing theatre. One of 6 in the country. Live is one of the very few theatres in Britain that concentrates on new work, on new plays, solely and only on developing new work by writers, by new artists, by some very famous writers. And the journey I think I'm going to describe ends up as an organisation that's trying to make our corner of our city a better place. So you start as an arts organisation and you end up as trying to do something very different for your city. So when I took over Live Theatre in 2000, it was insolvent. If any arts organisation takes on a capital project, a building project, it's always a kind of risky endeavour because capital projects are inevitably large sums of money and arts organisations inevitably have small turnovers. And that's exactly what happened at Live. But at the same time that it was insolvent, it had a play on in the West End. So its creative heart was always at an interesting point, an interesting place. And so the stakeholders were interested in helping it survive and continue to grow. And that's kind of where I came in. There was a check on the table from the Arts Council to make change, which actually was very easy in our organisation because all we really had to do was all turn and face the same way, both in terms of the board and in terms of the staff and in terms of the vision of the organisation. So by the time we got to 2003, we practically trebled our turnover. We had, which was fairly small at that point, we had successful plays going on in stages at Live, but also in other places. And we heard about the building next door to us that was, in actual fact, I introduced myself to our neighbours on my second day at Live. And the first thing they said to me was, do you know our lease is coming up in a couple of years? And I just parked that thought because it wasn't the sort of conversation the board would have wanted to hear, a month into my sort of tenure at Live. But I just parked that thought. And eventually we did the deal in 2003 through to 2007. We raised the money and we built the new building, what you see as Live Theatre now. A beautiful set of historic buildings. Some of our buildings are over 500 years old. It was a nightmare to do because historic buildings don't have foundations and all sorts of things can go wrong. But actually, the money it would cost you to create that atmosphere in your theatre would be extraordinary. It's just a beautiful set of buildings. We're very proud of them. But whilst we were doing that, we kind of looked to our future, and we could see that the landscape was going to change. We could see that the public sector was likely to get smaller. This is way before the recession. It was just a sense that the public sector was likely to get smaller. And Live, if you know it, is a 200-seat theatre. And so our box office we had very good audiences, and so our box office wasn't going to increase. Our Arts Council and city money wasn't going to increase, and if anything, it was going to go down. So we started thinking differently about how we were going to sustain ourselves, and really that's the story I'm going to tell you tonight. Between 2005 and 2007, we started experimenting. Well, I came across this notion of social enterprise. So a social enterprise is basically a business that makes an income and invests that income back into the mission of the organisation. So it's not about profit, it's about making resources happen that you can then invest back into your mission. And I really liked the idea of it. I think I went to a conference in about 2004 and came across it, and came back, and we started talking at the board and the staff about this notion of creating social enterprises. We had nowhere else to go. Our box office was full, our fundraising was full. I didn't think we'd get any more money from the Arts Council or the City Council, so we had to do it ourselves. So in 2007-8, we opened the building. We opened with Pitman Painters, which is a very successful production. It ended up going to London, to the National Theatre, to the West End, and to Broadway, and actually it only stopped playing about 12 months ago. So it nearly played as a live or National Theatre production for about 8 years. And then, of course, in 2008, the landscape changed completely. The recession happened, public sector started to look different, and has continued to look different, and will continue to look different for the next decade. The public sector landscape has changed completely, and it will never come back. It would be nice if it did, but it isn't going to. And in that milieu, in that kind of context, we started thinking about what we could do and how we could do it differently. So I'm going to start. I've got some really fantastic pictures. I'm really fed up. I couldn't do a PowerPoint for you because I've got really brilliant pictures. I brought my laptop so you can have a look at some of them at the interval.
Cheating.
And I've got some A3 things that I'm going to use. So I'll deal with.
It's a glamorous assistant.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with why we are here, and this notion of what's an arts organisation for. And so, if you'd have asked live theatre a decade ago, what are you for? Somebody would have said, well, we do new plays, and we do youth theatre programmes, and we do artist programmes. At that point, we weren't doing social enterprises. And then if you ask the reason, well, why are you here? What's the point of your existence? Why are you here? We would say, as time went on, well, we're here. Yes, we do new plays, but we're here really to inspire and inform and challenge audiences with world-class art. That's why we're here. And we're here with youth theatre programmes. We're here to unlock the potential of young people, because we know that culture and art unlocks their potential. And with artist programmes, we're here to develop, train and nurture talent from the region, but also outside the region. And when we come to social enterprises, we're talking about future thinking. We're thinking into the future about what a cultural institution looks like. So our mission is those things. That's the why we're here. But if you continue that kind of conversation, you go, we do new plays, we inspire, we inform, we challenge audiences. And the reason we do that is because we are interested in creating a just and equal society, because that's what culture is. Art and plays are about empathy. If you go to a play, you go to a movie, you sit in a concert with a whole bunch of strangers, and you're empathizing about the situation on stage. So that kind of bigger view of the world was very important to us as we started to develop these social enterprises. So if we train and develop talent, what do we do? Well, we create more artists, we potentially create more businesses, there's more SMEs, more graduates will want to stay in the city, and that contributes to a stronger economy. So it's just thinking big about what our mission and vision is. So I think most of you will know about Live, but if you don't, it's a 200-seater new writing theatre, and our plays, our theatre is a crucible for ideas, and our ideas go around the world. So people come to us because we have the ideas and the intellectual property that they can work with. So, Wet House last year went to Soho Theatre. Our Ladies of Perpetual Soccer, which is on at the moment, is completely sold out. It's a co-production with the National Theatre of Scotland. It will have another life next year. You can't see it now because it's completely sold out, but you will be able to see it next year, I guarantee that. And it will have another life going elsewhere, probably to the States as well. So our productions go around the world. I'm trying to underline the fact that we are much more than a theatre. Young people's programmes, developing people, helping artists develop, create and stay in the city. We win awards for both our education and indeed for our productions. We do new plays by 9-year-olds, we do new plays by 12-year-olds, we produce them. This is a particularly nice shot that you can't see at the back, but this is first draft. This is new plays by 9-year-olds, and the actors in these shots are the same actors that were in the Broadway production of Pitman Painters. So we approach our education with the same integrity, the same kind of degree of quality and production values as we would a main house production. It makes them special events, and it makes it a very special experience for the young people involved in writing and creating these productions. So that's a little background on Live. We've been going for 40 years, 42 years, and we've been on the Quayside for 32 years. We moved into the Quayside when it was dirty, dark and dangerous, which meant that the buildings were incredibly cheap. And that's what artists and arts companies do. They move into decrepit buildings so that they have some space. So the basis of this conversation really is this statement that I heard someone say at a conference about 3 or 4 years ago, that any great city is built on the twin pillars of culture and economy. So if you get the culture of a city right, if it's safe, if the coffee shops are good, if the museums are friendly and accessible, and the cinema is likewise, and the theatres and the concert halls and the galleries are, then you'll have a place that people want to come. I mean, Newcastle and Gateshead is like this place, is like what I'm describing, I think. You'll have a place where businesses want to set up, you'll have a place where students want to come and learn, you'll have successful universities, and you'll have graduates that then want to stay, and graduates that want to set up their own businesses. And the tax base of the city increases, and the city can then look after its people. It's a kind of virtuous circle. This sense of culture and economy underpinning a great creative city, it transforms a city culturally, socially and economically. It's pretty much the basis for our approach over the last few years. So we're a £2 million operation. We have 30 people work for us full-time, and in any one year we'll be hiring about 200 people, artists, designers, lighting designers, arts education people. So we're recognised as a real trailblazer. In fact, there's a quote in the Financial Times, there's Live Theatre, a national trailblazer in finding new ways to sustain and grow, from the FT last year. But I do a lot of mind maps. Now, you won't be able to see this, but that's one of my mind maps from 2008. And we had this notion of social enterprises. We just opened the new theatre. We had a list of ideas, which were pretty much the list of ideas that we came up with in 2005, 2006. It went, let's do something with our intellectual property. Let's do something with our old entrance. Let's see if we can buy the building that's attached to us behind us. And let's do some form of commercial development that would form an endowment for live theatre into the long term. And actually, we've pretty much done all those 4 things, even though we didn't know we were going to do this commercial development that we are doing at the moment. But I've circled it here, this word here. So this is about all of our success. This is about the impact of live theatre. And then here is the public sector and the danger of the diminution of public sector resources. In fact, I've got minus 300,000. And my mind map for July just put the word challenging. My mind map for September the 15th says bleak. And so that sense of actually the landscape changing so completely for cultural organisations, we were thinking about it then. And then, in 2012, on the front page of the journal, I'm sorry it's not the best of pictures, but this is me going, Culture Cuts report reveals devastation for Newcastle. And of course the City Council, put in a very difficult position by this government, had to make severe cuts and included cutting the arts funding that they put to 8 independent organisations, including this one, Dance City, Live Theatre, 7 Stories, Theatre Royal, Northern Stage and Timely Museums. So it was a really difficult time and a really surprising time. But we had been thinking about this for a few years prior to this. And the notion of using social enterprise eventually turned into 4 social enterprises. We have the Broad Chair, which is our pub. We do that as a joint venture with Terry Laybourne, one of the most successful restaurateurs in the Northeast. We have a digital business training playwrights. We have 180 people doing the course online, and they pay for it. We bought the schoolhouse and we've attached it to live theatre. We've refurbished it, kind of saved it really. It was in a terrible wreck. It was a terrible wreck. And we have now subsequently let it out. And we bought this little bit of corner of the city, of the quayside. We did that last year and we have now built on it. So those are the 4 things we've done. And I think one of the reasons that we've been able to do this is because we have great audiences. We have about 300 young people in our youth theatre. We have about 250 students that work with us from Northumbria, Gateshead College and Newcastle College. There's a lot of support for what we do. But I suppose it's also about advocacy and politics. And even though you always have to be generous in life, it seems to me. If you're generous in life, you will get further and make more friends. And so in the conversation with the City Council about, you really are going to take the money away. Okay, if you're going to take the money, could you lend us some money? And of course, it's the reaction from the City Council was, well, if we can, we will. And so the last project, which is LiveWorks, is an £11 million project. The city lent us £6 million. We raised the other £5 million from Europe, the Arts Council, and fundraising more generally. And we've created this beautiful building on the quayside. And I've got to show you this. We'll circulate this at the interval. But those of you that have been in Newcastle a while will remember the quayside front, this tin shack on the quayside. Some people are nodding. And then what we have now is a beautiful contemporary stone building. This isn't a CGI, this is a real thing. And that is now finished and built. We're about to let it out, and that will create an income stream for Live to sustain us into the long term. So the Broad Chair earns us a play a year. It's one of the best gastropubs in the northeast. The schoolhouse earns us an education project a year, which is about £40,000. And Liveworks, when it's finished, the park is finished, and the children's centre is finished, will earn us about £300,000. So in about 6 years, we will have created a way of making £500,000 a year to invest back into the mission of live theatre, which is world-class plays, developing creative talent from the northeast, unlocking the potential of young people, and thinking of new ways of doing things differently. And that amounts to about £10 million worth of assets. Now, Live started life as a Marxist co-op. We kind of come a long way in that regard, I think. But about a decade ago, I heard this story of, so you can walk from Cambridge to London on Cambridge University land. So that's about 120 miles worth of land. And it struck me that actually, why couldn't this former Marxist co-op in the northeast of England do something similar? So this is what we're trying to do. But you have to remember, it's not about the money. It's about making more plays. It's about doing more work with children and young people. As part of this office development, at the back is Live Tales. That's going to be our centre for literacy and creative writing for children and young people. And by the time it really gets going, we'll work with lots of volunteers. We will have a small core team. And in a couple of years' time, we'll be working with about 10,000 kids a year using creativity to develop their literacy. And if anybody has read the latest impact indices of the region, the literacy indices are poor. This region needs to improve its literacy. And so we will be doing that. And so I came up with this sort of title for the lecture, talking about cultural leadership and enterprise in a very changed public sector. And so some of the things about leadership that I think are important, well, one of them is time, because we have had the time to develop these ideas. We've had the time to do the politics and the lobbying and develop the brand and bring the audiences and stakeholders with us. We've had a great vision, and we've been able to build it slowly, one project after another. So advocacy and the politics small p is incredibly important in terms of thinking about being a cultural leader and a cultural entrepreneur. I think all my colleagues that run arts organisations in Newcastle and Gateshead are very adept and very skillful at that. But it's also about the clarity of mission. How clearly do your staff understand what you're doing? How clearly do your audience, how clearly do your board understand what you're doing? So in 2007, when we're kind of starting to face these changes, it was a determination to think differently and do what we do, but do it differently. Kind of staring at the wall and wondering what was the way around it. We spent a long time thinking about that and talking to others about what we were trying to do. Most of the entrepreneurs I meet, because when you talk about a business idea, generally people think it has a huge business plan and behind it and lots of research. My experience is that most of the entrepreneurs I know stick their finger in the air and go, yeah, I think that might work. And that's it. They will do a cost-benefit analysis on one side, but mostly they're using their instinct and their experience to get further. And lots of people ask me about the risks we are taking, the risks of doing an office development. And I have to tell you, we haven't let it yet. It's just been finished. So I'm no longer worrying about the building or building the building. We've got a very beautiful building. I'm just worrying about getting it let. And then once it's got let, we'll just worry about something else. We'll just move on to the next thing. So it's a continuous journey. And some people, journalists have asked me, said, well, wouldn't it be easier if the Arts Council had just given me the money? And, well, in one regard, it would. Well, of course it would. But would we be stronger as a result of that? And actually, we are so much stronger as a result of engaging with the widest of communities in the city. So it's brought us into contact with all the lawyers that live and work around us. It's brought us into contact with restaurateurs. There'll be several restaurants in this new development. We will have 160 people working in our new building. There are businesses that are living and that are working in the schoolhouse. We have a much wider engagement with the community and the breadth of the people that live and work in the city than we would ever have had if we had just stuck to making plays and doing arts education. I think we were in a much stronger position as a result. And then the risk of not making your box office, the risk of not getting the fundraising target, the risk of maybe the local authority cutting its funding to you, all of those things are there. And you balance those risks off, like one of the greatest undeveloped sites on the quayside, you're going to go, actually, we'll go for this development. So the other thing I wanted to say is that people are very important. This is all about people. People are the catalyst for making change. I've got an amazing board who have a skill at understanding the degree of risk we're taking, and saying no sometimes, which is absolutely what they're there for. I've got a staff team that kind of get the idea and then get on with it. And so it's about the people that make these things happen. I'm struck by, if any of you have come across Eric Kandel, he's a Nobel psychologist and neuroscientist. He wrote a great book called The Art of Insight, and it's about how we see artists' paintings. So when you look at a painting, your eyes are not cameras. They're absolutely not cameras. There's a bit of your brain that understands the horizontal. There's a bit of your brain that understands the horizontal, and a bit of your brain that understands the vertical. A bit of your brain that understands the detail, but only tiny bits of detail. A bit of your brain that understands the overview, the context. Bits of your brain that do black and white and colour. Memory is one of the most important factors about what we see, because we are always referring to what we've seen before. So it's absolutely amazing. So when we look at a painting, there's about 50 different pathways to different bits of our brain, and our brain then puts the picture together in our head. So when people talk about the audience as part of the art, it's absolutely true. You are partaking and putting together the art that you are perceiving in many different ways when you're in a gallery, or indeed sitting in an audience in a theatre. So if that's what our brain does about vision, just purely vision, then I think that what we can do as cultural organisations is work very hard at seeing things differently and coming up with different ideas to be able to make more dance in this place, more theatre in our place, more visual arts in the Baltic, or more great stuff in museums and heritage. So I think we brought that to our thinking as well about doing it differently. And so I think there are some sort of overarching things. One is that it's unfair, but I have no absolute power, because I would quite like it. But I have a board that I have to answer to, I have to negotiate with, who are the titular head. They have the financial and fiduciary duty for the charity. I have a staff team who I have to manage. So we're kind of negotiating upwards and downwards, and indeed sideways with stakeholders and investors. I think that's a pretty good place to be, because it does bring you into contact with lots and lots of different people all the time. But if there's anything to this story about how a cultural institution continues to thrive in the teeth of a pretty appalling recession, there are some things that I think are important. One is time. So we have had enough time to develop one project after another, to make relationship one after another. I sometimes say that I've been at Life for 15 years and pretty much met 2 or 3 people a day. That's about 9,000 people. So you need to do that sort of advocacy. So that time and perseverance is very, very important. Obviously, you need to have a great vision, something that will attract people. I was at a meeting of funders about a month ago, and I showed, he took out the mind map that I showed you earlier, and reminded me that I came to the meeting, it was at Esme Fairbairn Foundation, with this mind map. And they all thought I was mad. But the chief executive of the foundation thought, this is quite interesting, we should talk more. So I have a fantastic board, and that takes time to get, to organise, to lobby, to find the right person, people that love what you do. So my chairman is a brilliant entrepreneur, public sector figure, and he loves theatre. And he's also a socialist, which is very helpful. It's getting that sort of, finding great staff and great investors. So the same foundation, Esme Fairbairn Foundation, we went to them and said, we're doing live works. It's a huge project for us. We've never done anything like this before. We need some more senior managers. Will you give us some money? They went, yeah, okay. You can have this money for 3 senior posts in the organisation for 3 years, by which time it has to be sustainable. And by the way, we think you need another. I mean, what? And they said, yeah, we think that you need a finance manager, because Wendy is brilliant, who's our operations director, and she's a genius with numbers. But she needed more thinking time, more strategic thinking time. And so that's cool, that's a great investor. You need really great stories, and great stories make for good relationship, make for more resources. And you also have to take risks and have a way of dealing with those risks. So I started this with saying that I started at Live Theatre as a chief exec of a new writing producing theatre, but we're ending up being an organisation that makes our bit of the city a better place. Now, which of those 2 statements is more attractive to the city, to the region, and to funders? I'll test you on that question later. So that's me done. Thank you very much.
Cafe Culture North East is supported by Newcastle University, Peels and Dance City. We're also supported by DC Cafe, who host the events.